Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. Lyra's bioluminescent markings shimmered faintly under the dim light of the forest moon. It was a trait unique to the noble lineage of the Elinari, a testament to their ancient bloodlines. Tonight, though, the glow was muted, both by her attempts to conceal herself and the fear constricting her heart. She crouched low behind a cluster of silver-leaf trees, her large, opalescent eyes scanning the silent night. The steps behind her had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Why would my stepmother call me to the woods at such an hour? She wondered, her trust in her family already fraying after years of subtle cruelty. Lyra, a cold, sing-song voice called, the tone drenched in mock affection. It was her stepmother, but something in the woman's cadence made Lyra's skin prickle. Come out, darling. I have a surprise for you. She froze, her glowing markings dimming further. The urge to obey fought with a deep instinctual warning. The sound of metallic footsteps shattered the stillness. Lyra's breath caught as figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes adorned with the unmistakable bulk of mercenary gear. Their leader stepped forward, an alien of hulking stature with skin like polished onyx and glowing red eyes. Her stepmother's voice was sweeter now, coaxing. There's no point in hiding. Be a good girl. Heart hammering, Lyra bolted. The mercenaries shouted in guttural tones as she dashed deeper into the forest, her bare feet slipping on moss and roots. But they were faster, and her faintly glowing skin betrayed her position no matter how she tried to conceal it. A sharp pain lanced through her shoulder as something struck her. A tranquilizer dart. The world spun, her legs buckling. As her vision dimmed, she glimpsed her stepmother standing smugly beside the onyx-skinned alien, counting a stack of glowing credit chips. Lyra woke in chains aboard a dimly lit cargo hold, the air heavy with the scent of metal and despair. Around her, other captives of various species huddled in misery. She tried to rise, but the chains around her wrists and ankles pulled taut. Her markings flickered weakly, reflecting her panic. A low voice came from her left. Don't waste your strength. She turned to see a wizened alien whose scales shimmered with an oily sheen. He sat cross-legged, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of pity and resignation. First time in a slaver's hold? He asked. Lyra nodded, too numb to speak. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Best keep that glow of yours under control, the old alien murmured. It'll fetch a high price. Makes you a target. Why are they doing this? Lyra whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm not. You are now, he interrupted grimly. Doesn't matter who you were. They strip you of all that. The sooner you accept it, the better your chances of surviving. But Lyra couldn't accept it. She couldn't let this be her end. She had to find a way out, no matter the odds. Above her, the cargo bay door creaked open, revealing the ship's captain, a heavily armored alien with multiple eyes that gleamed like molten gold. He barked orders in a guttural tongue, his subordinates descending to inspect the prisoners. One of them stopped in front of Lyra, leering as his clawed hand tilted her chin to inspect her glowing features. This one, the slaver growled. Auction her separately. As she was dragged away, Lyra's gaze turned toward the stars visible through a narrow viewport. Though the vastness of space had always comforted her, it now seemed a cold and indifferent void. Yet, amidst her despair, a seed of hope remained. Someone out there, somehow, would help her escape this nightmare. The slaver's ship docked at a massive orbital station known as Vortex Prime, a bustling black market hub where all manner of illegal dealings occurred. Lyra was hauled into the auction chambers, her glowing markings dimmed by exhaustion, but still captivating enough to draw attention. As the auction began, Lyra's fate seemed sealed, until a human, rugged and mysterious, entered the room. He was no mere buyer, he had a plan of his own. Lyra stood on a raised platform, her wrists bound by glowing energy restraints. The room buzzed with an ominous energy as various alien species crowded the auction chamber, their voices rising in a cacophony of languages. The slavers boasted of her rarity, highlighting her bioluminescent markings and noble Elinari lineage as if she were a mere object. Lyra's heart pounded as the bidding began. Numbers she didn't understand were shouted, each alien bidder more grotesque and menacing than the last. She tried to stay stoic, her gaze fixed on the floor to avoid the leers and calculating stares. Sold for 50,000 credits, the auctioneer announced, slamming a metallic gavel. Lyra's knees nearly buckled. Her buyer stepped forward, a towering alien with spiked carapace armor and multiple eyes that glinted with greed. He grinned, revealing rows of jagged teeth. She wanted to scream, to fight, but the restraints sapped her strength. Before the slaver could complete the transaction, a sharp voice cut through the din. "Hold on," it said in the Galactic trade tongue, calm but commanding. The room fell silent as a human strode into view. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in a worn flight jacket adorned with faded insignias. His hair was dark, his face shadowed by stubble, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto Lyra. Unlike the other bidders, his expression wasn't predatory, it was calculating. "Who are you to interrupt?" the auctioneer snapped, his many arms gesturing in frustration. "Captain Dax Harper," the human replied, pulling a credit chip from his pocket. He tossed it onto the auctioneer's desk. "I'm here to outbid." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The spiked alien snarled, "This is against protocol. The auction is over." Dax's smile was razor-sharp. "Is it? Or are you just afraid I've got more credits than you?" The auctioneer hesitated, greed flickering in his expression. "Very well. The bidding is reopened." Lyra watched in disbelief as Dax raised the stakes. The spiked alien roared in frustration, his bids growing desperate until he finally stormed out, cursing in his guttural language. With a victorious smirk, Dax stepped forward. "Looks like she's mine." The auctioneer handed over a control device for Lyra's restraints. "She's your responsibility now. No refunds." Dax nodded, his demeanor cool as he took the device. But as soon as the crowd dispersed, his expression softened. He approached Lyra cautiously, lowering his voice. "Don't panic. I'm not here to hurt you," he said, deactivating her restraints. Lyra's knees gave out, and Dax caught her before she hit the ground. His touch was firm but gentle, and for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of safety. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. "Someone who doesn't like slavers," he replied, helping her to her feet. "Can you walk?" She nodded shakily, though her legs felt like jelly. "We need to move," Dax said. "The longer we stay, the more likely they'll figure out I don't actually have 50,000 credits." Lyra blinked. "You what?" Dax grinned. "Let's just say I have a knack for bluffing." He led her through the labyrinthine corridors of Vortex Prime, navigating past guards and cameras with surprising ease. Lyra couldn't help but notice his confidence, the way he carried himself like someone who thrived on danger. As they reached a docking bay, a sleek but battle-worn ship came into view. Dax ushered her aboard, locking the hatch behind them. "Welcome to the Aurora's Edge," he said, gesturing to the ship's interior. It was cramped but functional, with a cockpit brimming with outdated but well-maintained controls. Lyra sank into a chair, her exhaustion catching up with her. "Why did you save me?" Dax's expression turned serious. "Let's just say I have my reasons. You're not the only one who's been hurt by people like them." She studied him, trying to decipher his cryptic words. Though she didn't fully trust him yet, she felt a strange sense of hope, a feeling she thought she'd lost forever. As the ship powered up, Dax glanced at her. "By the way, what's your name?" "Lyra," she said softly. "Well, Lyra," he said with a faint smile, "buckle up. Things are about to get interesting." The Aurora's Edge lifted off, leaving the chaos of Vortex Prime behind. For the first time in days, Lyra felt the weight of captivity begin to lift. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. She was finally free. Aboard the Aurora's Edge, Lyra begins to process the trauma of her capture, and her trust in Dax is tested. Meanwhile, Dax must deal with the consequences of his impulsive rescue, as Vortex Prime slavers place a bounty on his head. Their flight through hostile space takes a dangerous turn when a bounty hunter's ship intercepts them, forcing Lyra to confront her fears and Dax to reveal the secrets of his past. The hum of the Aurora's Edge's engines was steady and reassuring, but Lyra couldn't relax. Sitting cross-legged on a small cot in the crew quarters, she traced her glowing markings absent-mindedly. They had dimmed since her ordeal began, a sign of her diminished energy and spirit. Across the room, Dax leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. His sharp blue eyes studied her, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. Lyra nodded automatically, though her trembling hands betrayed her. She clenched them into fists, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Why did you really save me?" "I told you," Dax said, stepping into the room. "I hate slavers." "That's not a reason," she countered, her voice rising. "You don't know me. You risked your life and your ship for a stranger." "Why?" Dax hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. "Let's just say I've been where you are. I've seen what those monsters do to people, and I couldn't stand by." Lyra frowned. "You've been a slave?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Not exactly, but close enough. Before she could press him further, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them both off balance. Alarms blared as the overhead lights flickered. "What was that?" Lyra asked, scrambling to her feet. "Trouble," Dax muttered, already halfway to the cockpit. Lyra followed him, her unease growing. As they reached the cockpit, the ship's AI, a clipped female voice, spoke up. "Incoming vessel detected. Scans indicate a bounty hunter-class ship. Weapons systems armed." Dax cursed under his breath, sliding into the pilot's chair and pulling up the display. The hologram showed a sleek, heavily armed ship closing in fast. "They must have tracked us from Vortex Prime," he muttered. "Probably figured out I scammed the auctioneer." Lyra's heart sank. "What do we do?" Dax's fingers danced over the controls. "We run." The Aurora's Edge surged forward, engines roaring as Dax pushed the ship to its limits. The pursuing vessel fired, and the ship rocked as laser blasts grazed its shields. "Can't outrun them forever," the AI warned. "Shields at 80% and dropping." Dax grimaced. "Thanks for the optimism, Vega." "Just doing my job," the AI replied dryly. Lyra gripped the back of his chair, her fear mounting. "There has to be something we can do." Dax glanced at her, his expression resolute. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve, but I'll need your help." Her stomach clenched. "Me? What can I do?" "Vega, bring up the manual targeting system," Dax ordered. The holographic display shifted, showing a grid of the pursuing ship. Dax pointed to a flashing node. "That's their primary weapons array. If we can disable it, we'll have a chance to jump to hyperspace." Lyra stared at the console, her hands trembling. "I've never done anything like this before." "Just follow my instructions," Dax said firmly. "You can do this." She swallowed hard, nodding. "Okay. What do I do?" "Take the controls," he instructed, sliding another console toward her. "Aim for the flashing node. Don't think, just act." The targeting system was complex, but Lyra focused, her fingers hovering over the controls. As the bounty hunter's ship loomed closer, her bioluminescent markings began to brighten, a sign of her rising adrenaline. "Now!" Dax shouted. Lyra fired. The ship's lasers streaked through the void, striking the enemy vessel's weapons array. Sparks and debris erupted as the array was disabled. "Yes!" Dax exclaimed, pulling the Aurora's Edge into a sharp turn. "Hold on." Lyra barely had time to brace herself as the ship lurched into hyperspace. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light, and the bounty hunter's ship disappeared from sight. As the ship stabilized, Lyra collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. She looked at Dax, who was grinning despite the tension. "Nice shooting," he said. She managed a weak smile. "I can't believe that worked." Dax leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You've got good instincts." "That's half the battle." Lyra's markings dimmed as her adrenaline faded. "What happens now? They'll come after us again, won't they?" Dax's expression grew serious. "Probably. But we'll be ready." She studied him, her fear slowly giving way to a strange sense of trust. Despite everything, Dax had risked his life to save hers. And he believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. For the first time, she began to feel like she wasn't entirely alone. With the immediate danger behind them, Lyra and Dax begin to bond as they drift through deep space. Lyra learns more about Dax's mysterious past, and he teaches her basic skills to survive in a harsh galaxy. However, their moment of peace is cut short when Lyra's unique bioluminescence begins to manifest as a new, uncontrolled power, putting them both at risk as it draws unwanted attention. Lyra stared out of the viewport in the dim light of the ship's common area. The streaks of hyperspace were mesmerizing, like rivers of light flowing endlessly. Yet her mind was far from calm. Her hands trembled as she replayed the recent battle in her mind. The flashing lights, the tension in Dax's voice, the burst of sparks when her shot connected. She had never thought herself capable of such a thing. "You should eat," Dax's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him setting a tray of food on the small table. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular arms crisscrossed with faint scars. He gestured toward the tray. "You've been running on empty since we left Vortex Prime. Trust me, ration bars aren't gourmet, but they'll keep you alive." Lyra hesitated before sitting at the table. She unwrapped one of the bars and nibbled at the corner. It was dry and flavorless, but her empty stomach didn't care. "Thanks," she murmured. Dax leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You did good back there, you know. Most people freeze up their first time under fire." "I was terrified," she admitted, lowering the bar. "But it felt different, too. Like I couldn't afford to fail." He nodded, his gaze softening. "Fear's a powerful motivator. Can paralyze you or it can sharpen you. You used it to fight back. That's what matters." Lyra studied him, curiosity bubbling to the surface. "You said you've been through something like this before. What happened?" Dax's expression darkened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, pulling a chair closer and sitting across from her. "I wasn't born into the best circumstances," he began, his voice low. "Grew up on a mining colony run by a corporation that didn't care about its workers. When the mine dried up, they abandoned us. Left us to fend for ourselves in the middle of nowhere." Lyra's heart ached at the bitterness in his tone. "Pirates showed up not long after," he continued. "Turned the colony into their playground. They took what they wanted, supplies, ships, people." He paused, his jaw tightening. "My little sister was one of them." "I'm so sorry," Lyra whispered, her chest tightening. Dax gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's why I can't stand slavers. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can stop someone else from going through that hell." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, Lyra felt like she understood the man who had risked everything to save her. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." He shrugged. "Don't mention it. Just promise me you'll keep fighting. This galaxy isn't kind to the passive." She nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. The ship's AI interrupted their moment of calm. "Captain, incoming anomaly detected." Dax sat up straight. "Define anomaly, Vega. Energy readings consistent with a high-output electromagnetic pulse. Origin unknown." Lyra frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we might have company," Dax said, standing and heading for the cockpit. Lyra followed, her unease growing. When they reached the cockpit, the holographic display showed a pulsing sphere of energy in their vicinity, its colors shifting like an oil slick. "Looks like a natural phenomenon," Dax muttered. Before Lyra could respond, her bioluminescent markings flared to life, bathing the room in soft light. She gasped, her hands flying to her arms as the glow grew brighter. "What's happening?" she cried, panic rising. Dax turned to her, alarmed. "I don't know. Is this normal for you?" "No," she said, her voice shaking. "It's never done this before." The glowing markings spread, and Lyra felt a strange warmth coursing through her body. The ship's lights flickered, and the holographic display distorted. "Vega! Report!" Dax barked. "Unidentified energy interference," the AI responded. "Origin appears to be the passenger." Lyra's eyes widened. "Me? How is that possible?" The energy pulsing from her markings intensified, and suddenly the ship lurched as if caught in a gravitational wave. Dax grabbed the controls, his face a mask of concentration. "Whatever you're doing, stop," he shouted. "I don't know how," she cried, tears streaming down her face. The warmth in her body turned to heat, and she felt as if she might explode. Desperation clawed at her as she tried to contain the energy, focusing on dimming her markings. Slowly, the glow began to fade, and the ship stabilized. The cockpit fell silent, save for their ragged breathing. "What was that?" Dax finally asked, turning to her. "I don't know," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "It's never happened before." Dax studied her, his gaze a mix of concern and suspicion. "We need to figure out what's going on with you. Whatever that was, it nearly got us killed." Lyra nodded, though fear churned in her gut. She didn't understand what was happening to her, but one thing was clear. Her bioluminescence was more than a physical trait. It was a power she couldn't control. And in a galaxy as dangerous as this, that made her both a target and a threat in the aftermath of Lyra's uncontrolled energy outburst, both she and Dax are left grappling with the mystery of her newfound power. As they make their way toward a hidden refuge, Dax begins to train Lyra to harness the energy inside her, while a more sinister force takes notice of her unusual abilities. Meanwhile, Lyra is forced to confront the truth about her heritage and what her powers might mean for her future. The days that followed Lyra's burst of energy were filled with uneasy silence. Though the ship was still operational, the tension between her and Dax was palpable. Neither of them knew what to make of the event, especially with the strange electromagnetic pulses still lingering in the wake of the incident. Lyra spent most of her time in the ship's rear quarters, trying to meditate and regain control over the wild energy that coursed through her veins. It was both a physical and emotional struggle. Each time she attempted to focus, her markings would pulse unpredictably, like a living thing fighting her will. Dax, on the other hand, kept a watchful eye on her from the cockpit, scanning the surrounding space for threats. While he was trying to keep a brave face, Lyra could tell that even he didn't fully understand what was happening to her. One morning, as the ship drifted near the edge of a dense asteroid belt, Dax knocked on the door to her quarters. "Lyra," he called through the door. "We need to talk." Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself before opening the door. "What's going on?" He met her gaze, his eyes filled with both determination and concern. "I think it's time we get you trained." She raised an eyebrow. "Trained? What do you mean?" "You're clearly not in control of whatever's going on with your bioluminescence," he explained, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not a power expert, but I've seen enough to know that if we don't figure this out, it could be dangerous." Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. "I've tried, Dax. I've been trying to control it, but it's like it's alive inside me." He studied her for a moment before stepping aside. "Come with me. Let's try a different approach." Over the next few hours, Dax began teaching her how to center herself, offering exercises to help her channel her energy. He started with simple breathing techniques, urging her to focus on her pulse and steady her mind. At first, Lyra resisted, her frustration mounting as her markings flared brighter with every attempt. But Dax remained patient, never pushing too hard. "Focus on what you can control," Dax instructed, his voice calm yet firm. "Your breath, your heartbeat. Let everything else fade away." Lyra closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. Slowly, the frantic rush of thoughts in her mind began to quiet. She could feel the energy pulsing, hot and alive, beneath her skin. It was as though the power wanted to break free, but with Dax's guidance, she fought to rein it in. Minutes passed, and Lyra felt something shift. The pressure in her chest lightened, and her markings began to dim. For the first time since the incident, she felt in control. Dax's voice broke through her concentration. That's it. You're doing it. Lyra opened her eyes and glanced at her glowing arms. They were no longer a blinding light. They had returned to their usual soft glow. She could feel the power inside her, but now it was contained. That actually worked, she said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. Good. We'll keep working on it, Dax replied, a hint of pride in his voice. This is just the beginning. You're stronger than you realize, Lyra. You just need to believe it. But as Lyra smiled at the small victory, the ship's AI, Vega, interrupted them. Captain, approaching vessel detected. It is not responding to hails. Weapons systems are online. Dax's smile faded as he shot to his feet. Not good. Stay here. Lyra stood up, ready to argue, but Dax was already halfway to the cockpit. She hesitated, then followed him, her heart pounding. As they reached the cockpit, Dax's eyes were glued to the display. A heavily modified warship loomed ahead, its weapons trained on the Aurora's edge. This doesn't look like a standard bounty hunter, Lyra said, her voice tight with fear. No, Dax muttered, scanning the ship's signature. This ship's markings. I've seen them before. He turned to her, his face grim. This is an elite mercenary group, the Orcs. They're notorious for hunting down powerful individuals. If they've found us, they'll never stop until they have you. Lyra's stomach twisted in fear. They're after me? Dax nodded, activating evasive maneuvers. They must have detected your energy burst from the other day. We don't have much time. Suddenly, the ship jolted as the mercenary vessel fired. The shields flared up, absorbing the impact, but the ship rocked from the force. Vega's voice cut through the chaos. Shields at 50%. Incoming missile in 15 seconds. We're not outrunning them, Dax said, his tone sharp. I need you to stay calm, Lyra. We're going to fight back. Lyra's hands shook. How? Use what you've learned, Dax said, his eyes meeting hers. Focus that energy. We need to disable their weapons array, or we won't make it out of here. Lyra's heart pounded. She had only just started to control her power, and now she was supposed to use it in battle? Focus, Dax urged, his voice steady. You can do this. Trust me. Lyra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the heat inside her again, the pulsing energy that had once been so overwhelming. This time she channeled it. Slowly, deliberately, her markings flared bright, a surge of light and power streaming from her hands. She felt it, like a magnetic force pulling her toward the enemy ship. With a sharp exhale, she released the energy, sending a pulse of concentrated force at the mercenary ship's weapons array. The impact was immediate. Sparks flew from the enemy vessel as its weapons systems malfunctioned, and for a brief moment, the Aurora's edge was safe. Lyra's body trembled with exhaustion, but the battle wasn't over. The mercenaries would regroup and come back. She had no choice but to fight. Nice shot, Dax said, a mixture of awe and respect in his voice. But this isn't over. We need to keep moving. Lyra nodded, her heart racing as she realized just how dangerous this galaxy could be. Especially now that she had the power to change the course of their lives, for better or worse. With the mercenaries temporarily neutralized, Lyra and Dax find themselves on the run again. But this time, things are different. Lyra's newfound power has not only made her a target but also started to reveal deeper secrets about her origins. As Dax and Lyra seek refuge on a hidden world, they discover that the Orcs are not just mercenaries. They are part of a larger, more insidious force determined to capture Lyra. Meanwhile, Lyra faces a difficult choice: control her power or risk losing herself entirely. The aftermath of the attack left both the Aurora's edge and its crew battered, but Dax was determined to keep moving. He didn't trust the mercenaries to stay down for long. As the ship drifted through a quiet corner of the galaxy, Lyra sank into the seat next to the cockpit, her thoughts heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Nice job back there, Dax said, glancing at her as he manipulated the ship's controls. You really held your own. Lyra didn't respond immediately. Her mind was still processing everything. The surge of power, the crackling energy she had unleashed, and the sudden realization that she was more than just a slave or a refugee. She was something else. "I didn't think it would work," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was going to lose control again." Dax's gaze softened. "You're stronger than you know, Lyra. That was the key. You just need to learn how to control it, or it'll control you." She swallowed hard. "What if it's too late for me to control it? What if the power is a part of me now?" He didn't answer at first, his hands tightening on the controls as the ship flew deeper into the unknown. "Then we'll figure it out together." They continued in silence, the hum of the ship's engines filling the space between them. But the peace didn't last long. Vega's voice interrupted their quiet respite. "Captain, anomaly detected. Unknown energy signatures approaching. The frequency matches the one used by the Oracles." Dax cursed under his breath, his face hardening. "I thought we lost them. They're back." Lyra's heart sank. "How do they keep finding us?" "They must have some way to track your energy," Dax said, his voice tight. "I've been reading up on them. They've been after people like you for years. People with unique abilities." "People like me?" Lyra echoed, confusion flooding her. "What do you mean?" Dax's expression darkened. "There's a rumor. Some say the Oracles are hunting down those born with extraordinary abilities. They believe they're the key to unlocking ancient technology, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy." "Why would they want me?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Dax hesitated. "Because your power isn't just random. I think you're connected to something much bigger than either of us realize." Before she could respond, Vega spoke again. "Captain, the approaching ships have dropped out of hyperspace. Their trajectory suggests they are preparing for an ambush." "We're too exposed here," Dax said, his eyes scanning the display. "There's a small planet nearby, a refuge where people go to disappear. We can hide there for a while and figure out our next move." Lyra nodded, though unease gnawed at her. The idea of running, of hiding, felt foreign. She had always been a survivor, but now, there was something deeper at stake. Something inside her wanted to understand her power, wanted to fight back. The planet they sought refuge on was called Damaris, a forgotten world tucked away in the far reaches of uncharted space. It was small, with a dense jungle covering most of the surface, and its inhabitants were reclusive, avoiding contact with the outside world. Dax had been here before, once on a mission long before Lyra's rescue. He landed the Aurora's Edge in a secluded valley, far from any settlement or radar. As the ship's engines powered down, Lyra stepped off the ramp, breathing in the thick, humid air of the jungle. The planet felt isolated, untouched by the chaos of the galaxy. "I've got an old contact here," Dax said, glancing over his shoulder as he led her deeper into the jungle. "Someone who might be able to help us." Lyra was silent, her mind still spinning. The mercenaries were close, and she could feel the power inside her building again. It was like a storm that threatened to break free. She could no longer ignore it. As they made their way through the dense undergrowth, Dax stopped suddenly, his eyes scanning the area. "What is it?" Lyra asked. He held up a hand, signaling for silence. "We're not alone." A soft rustling came from the bushes ahead, and before they could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A tall woman, dressed in tattered armor, her face hidden behind a mask. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years in the wild. Dax's posture relaxed, but only slightly. "You're early, Kira," he said, his voice laced with suspicion. "I didn't have much of a choice," the woman replied, her voice gruff. "The Oracles are closing in. You've been tracked. We need to move." Lyra's heart pounded. "How do you know about the Oracles?" Kira's eyes flickered toward her, the mask hiding any emotions. "I've had run-ins with them before. They don't take kindly to people who don't fall in line." She motioned for them to follow. "We need to get to the hideout before they arrive. You're not safe here." "Not for long." Lyra hesitated, feeling the tension building again. The pull of her power was growing stronger. "I can't keep running," she said quietly, her voice firm. "I need to understand what this is. What's happening to me?" Dax turned to her, his eyes searching hers. And you will. But right now, survival comes first. We can't do anything if we're dead. Lyra nodded reluctantly, but deep inside, she knew Dax was right. If she didn't learn to control the power inside her, she might not live long enough to uncover the truth about her origins. As they followed Kira deeper into the jungle, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected, that the oracles, her power, and her very existence were all part of a larger puzzle she had yet to understand. As Lyra, Dax, and Kira make their way to the hidden refuge, Lyra's understanding of her power grows, as does the mystery of her origin. On the eve of a final confrontation with the oracles, the truth about her heritage is revealed, along with the unimaginable consequences her abilities could have for the galaxy. In the end, Lyra must decide whether to embrace her power or reject it, knowing that her choice will shape the future of not only her life, but the galaxy itself. The jungle was dense, the air thick with moisture and the sound of unseen creatures. Kira led the way with ease, her movements swift and calculated, as if she knew every inch of the land. Dax stayed close to Lyra, his protective stance unwavering. Lyra's thoughts, however, were elsewhere. Her mind kept returning to the strange energy inside her, the power that she could no longer deny. It wasn't just a physical anomaly. It was a part of her, an extension of who she was. But it wasn't something she could control fully, not yet. "Are we almost there?" she asked, her voice tight. "We're close," Kira responded, her tone clipped. "Keep moving." They pushed through the thick underbrush, the light fading as they approached a clearing. In the center was a large, weathered structure, half hidden by vines and moss. It was ancient, made of stone and metal, a relic of a time long past. "This is it," Kira said, gesturing to the building. "The hideout. You'll be safe here for now." Lyra took a deep breath, scanning the surroundings. There was something unsettling about the place, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Her senses were heightened, the energy within her thrumming as she neared the structure. Inside, the building was surprisingly well maintained, its walls lined with holographic maps and ancient technology. Several figures moved about, their faces obscured by masks or shadow. They looked up as Kira entered, but no one spoke. Dax stood close to Lyra, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "We need answers, Kira," he said. "You said you knew something about the oracles. What are they really after?" Kira nodded, leading them to a large table covered in maps and data pads. "Sit down. I'll explain what I know." As they took their seats, Kira began, her eyes scanning the room as if weighing her words. "The oracles are no ordinary mercenaries. They are a faction with one goal: to find and control individuals like you, Lyra." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Like me. You were born with the ability to manipulate energy, something rare, but not unique. There are others like you, scattered across the galaxy, but you're different." Kira's voice lowered, filled with gravity. "You're the key to unlocking an ancient technology that could alter the balance of power." Lyra blinked, trying to process the words. "What are you talking about? I don't even know what this power is. Why would it be so important?" Dax leaned forward, his face tense. "Kira, tell us what you know. The oracles are coming for us. If we don't understand this, we're dead." Kira hesitated before tapping a control on the table. A holographic image flickered to life, a star system far away, with an ancient-looking planet at its center. "This," she said, "is the birthplace of your abilities. The planet Vornith, a place of legend. According to what I've gathered, it was once home to an ancient race of beings who mastered energy manipulation far beyond anything we've seen. They were known as the Kalari." "The Kalari?" Lyra repeated, the name feeling both foreign and strangely familiar. "What do they have to do with me?" "The Kalari were wiped out long ago, but their legacy lives on in certain individuals, like you. The oracles are hunting for those who carry their bloodline, seeking to unlock the power of the Kalari's technology. You're not just a slave, Lyra. You are the descendant of one of the most powerful civilizations the galaxy has ever known." Lyra's mind reeled. She had spent her life as nothing more than a tool, nothing more than a slave to her stepmother, abandoned by her family. To hear that she was descended from a race of powerful beings was overwhelming. "But why me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did this power awaken in me? I don't even understand how it works." Kira stepped closer, her eyes filled with understanding. "The energy inside you is a remnant of the Kalari. Can be awakened, but only when the right person inherits it. You didn't choose it. It chose you." Dax's hand tightened around hers. "And now the oracles are after you because they want to control that power. They want to use you to unlock the Kalari technology. And they won't stop until they do." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "What happens if they unlock it?" The Kalari had the ability to reshape entire star systems. Their technology could give anyone who controls it the power to bend the universe to their will. Kira explained, her voice filled with dread. "If the oracles succeed, the balance of power in the galaxy will shift forever. There won't be anyone who can stop them." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. The fate of the galaxy itself could hinge on what she chose to do next. "Then I have to stop them," Lyra said, her voice hardening with resolve. Dax's gaze softened. "You're not alone in this. We'll fight with you. But we need to understand your powers, and we need to prepare. The oracles won't give up." Kira nodded. "You can't do this alone. We have resources here, weapons, and knowledge. But you'll need to make a choice, Lyra. Embrace your power fully or reject it. If you fully awaken the Kalari abilities within you, there's no going back. You'll become a weapon, not just to the oracles, but to everyone." Lyra's heart pounded. The choice she faced was overwhelming. Could she control the power inside her, or would it consume her? Could she fight against the very force that had been chasing her for so long? "I don't know if I can control it," Lyra whispered, fear flickering in her eyes. "You can," Dax said firmly, his voice steady. "Together we can figure this out. But whatever happens, we're in this together. You don't have to make this decision alone." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that was at stake. She had always been a survivor, but now she faced a choice that could change the course of the galaxy. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stellar HFY content. Ring that bell to stay updated, and we'll see you next time.